Hello, welcome to the Term-to-Term Retention Report training video. In this video, we will be using this report to outline the steps that we take to answer the questions: what proportion of first-generation, underrepresented, undergraduate sophomores in your program continued from a previous term to fall term of 2020? And how does that proportion compare to past fall quarters? How does the persistence rate for that group's enrollments in the next term compare to past terms? The report may look slightly different due to new developments, but we're hoping that by showing our steps on how we can use this report to answer these questions, it will give you a sense of how this report could help you. Let's get started. Here, we can see what the report looks like when you first open it. If your screen looks a little different than mine, that's okay. You should have access to the same Power BI tools and report functionality. But please reach out if you still have any questions after watching this video. On the far left, we have the Power BI General Navigation tools, and next to that, we have the report. On the top, we have some Power BI report-specific tools. We have the Reset to Default button, the Bookmark tool, the View Options tool, the Refresh Visuals button, and an option to favorite this report. Below that, we can see the report overview page. We can see a number of data visualizations here. We should also note that the date of the last refresh of data in this report is here, and that the data in the report is refreshed after every 10th day term census, except for the registration detail page, which is refreshed daily during open registration periods. Let's consider which page and slicers we will use to focus the data visualization and answer our question. Starting on the overview page, this page provides a high-level view of retention numbers for undergraduate and graduate students across different academic years and programs. However, while this page works well as a dashboard for general retention rates, we'll need to move to a page more focused towards our first question, which is about finding information about a term's enrollments in relation to its previous term. It's important to note that the pages in the report are grouped for two different functions: enrollment from previous term and enrollment in next term. The pages highlighted in green are meant to support the enrollment from previous term page, and the pages highlighted in blue support the enrollment in next term page. Each of the support pages here are designed to provide other angles and details on the data provided by the respective main pages. To get to the enrollment from previous term page, we could either click on the page here, or we could open up the slicer at the bottom of the page, select Enrollment from Previous Term, and then click on Jump to Page. Let's click on the Enrollment from Previous Term page in the Page column. On this page, we can see that there is now a set of slicers at the top of the page, and a spreadsheet of information below. Let's start applying slicers toward our first question. Let's first confirm that we're looking at the correct quarter. For this question, we're looking at the fall 2020 quarter, so we need to check that the term group slicer is set to fall, and that the term type slicer is set to quarter. This looks good and appears to be set by default by the report engineers. Since we're looking at the quarter's previous enrollments, there's a difference between the undergraduate and graduate students for the fall quarter. At the top of the page, the report highlights that the number of undergraduate students is being pulled from the spring quarter, and the number of graduate students is being pulled from the summer quarter. If we were to set the term group to winter, the prior term would be set to fall. This particular interaction is a reminder that the academic year is different for undergraduate and graduate students. So be sure to note that when adjusting the term slicer. Let's return this back to the fall quarter. And we can do that by clicking the Reset to Default button here, since fall is currently set as default. Let's continue on with applying slicers toward our question. We're looking at first generation in college students. So let's open the first generation in college slicer by clicking on the pull down arrow, click on the first generation in college box, and then click out of the slicer to apply it. First generation in college is now applied here, and though it may be hard to see in the spreadsheet, the data changed when the slicer was applied. Next, let's apply the URM flag slicer by opening it, clicking on URM, and clicking out of it to close it. Finally, we'll click on the class slicer. Scroll down in the options to find and click on sophomore, and click out of the slicer to finalize it. If we look at the top, we can see that the summer graduate section of the title has been removed. For the in your program part of the question, you can open the school, department, major program slicer here, but for this video, we're not going to apply it. We can also apply any other slicers if needed, but for our question here, we don't need any other slicers. Since I've applied an academic level slicer unnecessarily, I'm going to clear it by moving my mouse over it and then clicking on the eraser icon that appears. We can see that the slicer cleared by reverting to its default all. Let's look at the spreadsheet below. We can see fall quarters from each of the past 13 academic years in the left column, and each of the following columns show different pieces of data. If we click on the plus box here, we can expand their data sets as needed. For our question, we're looking to compare a number of sophomores that enrolled from a previous term in the 2020 fall quarter to past quarters. So we would need to look at the far right columns in the table. We can see the data represented as a number and as a percentage, which answers our question. Let's look at bookmarking this point so we can return to it as needed later. To create a bookmark, we'll click on the Bookmark tool here, and then click on Add a Personal Bookmark. Let's title it Prior Term, Fall, First Gen, Underrepresented, Soph, on today's date, and then click on Save. We recommend that the date be part of the bookmark title to breadcrumb when the bookmark was made. We can now see the new bookmark. To answer our second question, we'll have to look at the Enrollment in Next Term page. We could use the page navigation here, but if you look at the bottom of the page, there's also a Jump to Page button with Enrollment in Next Term selected. Let's click on the Jump to Page button. We can see the new page looks somewhat similar to the previous page, but there are some key differences. We can see at the top that spring is now the selected term, and it lists fall for undergraduates and summer for graduates as the next term. Since we're comparing the success rates of these undergraduate students moving into the fall quarter, the spring quarter needs to be selected. We can also see that slicers have not been applied. It's important to note that the slicers are not universally applied across the two page groupings. Since we're looking at the success rate of the same group, we'll have to apply the same slicers to the page since they haven't carried over. Let's open the class slicer and select sophomore, the URM slicer and apply URM, and the first generation in college slicer and apply first generation in college. Feel free to apply the school, department, major program slicer as needed. Since we've finished applying the slicers, let's take a look at the spreadsheet below. Our selected terms are again listed on the far left side, and the data is categorized in columns. The various success rates for each term are listed on the rightmost column. The success rate for 21 spring quarter is listed as 0%. Let's look into that. We know that the success rate for a quarter is found by this formula at the bottom of the page, and each column in the spreadsheet represents different pieces of data in that formula. The data from enrolled in next term from selected term is part of 21 fall quarter, which is from the 10th day census of that quarter. And the graduation rate data is normally updated within 10 days of the end of that term. We should also note that the 0% graduation rate in this column is due to the fact that we're looking at sophomores. If we clear the slicer by clicking on the eraser icon, the rates return to something more normal. But let's reapply the slicer again to get back to our question. We can see the success rate for the past spring quarters here, and we know that the 21 spring quarter will be updated when the 10th day census for fall quarter is updated. This looks to answer our second question, so let's follow the same process to create a bookmark. To bookmark our answer, we'll click on the Bookmark button again. Click on Add a Personal Bookmark. Title it Next Term, Fall, First Gen, Underrepresented, Soph, on today's date. Click on Save, and double check that it appears here. It looks like we found and bookmarked the information that answers our questions. So let's look at exporting the data. To export the data of this report, we have two options. If we wanted to export all of the data of the complete report, we would click on the Export option here, and then choose from three different options, as a PowerPoint, PDF, or Excel document. However, doing so would export the entire report, which could lead to pages and pages of data. Instead, let's focus on exporting the data in this table instead. If we click on the More Options section of a table that we want to focus on, we can see another option to export data. If we click on that, we'll be given options to customize the report, and by clicking on the Export button, we'll be prompted on where we want to save the data. Let's open the exported file. We can see the exported data below, along with a list of all the applied filters in the export at the top. There's a lot of data being represented in just this table, so an export of the entire report would be much larger. Each export option supports different purposes, but knowing about both options could be helpful in deciding which export option to go with. In this case, exporting the focus table would be much more manageable than the entire report. Thank you for taking the time to watch this training video. For more information, be sure to check the Inform SU training pages and the report infographic, manual, and glossary. We're working hard to build out more content aimed at specific reports, so please send any questions, comments, or feedback to informsu@seattleu.edu. Thank you again from the Inform SU team, and good luck!